Lupe Contreras, thank you very much for coming on to TheBoxingBar.com and welcome, my friend.
Hey, thank you, man. Thanks for having me on.
First of all, how's everything right now in Texas with all this COVID stuff? And it's been a crazy year. What's going on over there in Texas at the moment with all this?
Well, Texas is very different from California. I know that's where you're based. A lot more things are open here. There's a different mentality in Texas. It's as we like to say, it's a whole nother country here in the state of Texas. Um, we don't have as many restrictions as they do in California. You still see some people who are completely reluctant to accept what's going on, and you have thankfully the majority of the population was trying to be as considerate of the rest of the public as they can be. But it's like most places. Some people are affected, and some people are affected even more by the situation than others. But thankfully, everyone in my inner circle has been healthy. They've been smart, and they haven't been affected tremendously by it. They've all had the luxury of being able to work from home, or their line of work hasn't been affected too much. So I've been fortunate in that sense.
That's a great thing. And we're in the first few weeks of 2021. 2020, like I said, was a pretty crazy year for everybody. There was obviously a lot less boxing events in 2020 because of all this. How did that affect you work-wise? How did that all play into your work?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I wasn't immune to it either. One of my good friends, Raul Marquez, who works on Showtime, I clearly remember this conversation right around the beginning of March. We were kind of discussing, where we were going to go. We had all our dates lined up for the next couple of months. I think that there was even one point where I was kind of freaking out. I was like, okay, man, I got to go from New York to Mexico City, and then from Mexico City, I got to go here. And right on cue, right as we got off the phone, all these emails started coming in. I do MMA as well, so there was a series called Combate Americas where they sent in some information. Hey, we're canceling these shows. Top Rank started canceling shows as well, and pretty much from the end of February to early September, it was work was completely non-existent. And like I said, like a great majority of other people that work in the entertainment field, which obviously sports falls under, it affected a lot of us greatly. But like I said, fortunately, it was one of those things where throughout the years I've prepared. When somebody always asks me, "Hey, how come you don't drive a fancy sports car?" Now I can look at them and say, "Oh, see, this is why
That's
this is
true.
why I never bought a fancy sports car, because you
Right.
never know when
Exactly.
that rainy day might come, and the rainy day is here."
Slowly everything progressed, and now you guys slowly started having shows and whatnot. What is that like, having these shows with no crowd? And you would think it'd be a lot easier for you guys because you don't have all that crowd, and it'd be easier for you guys to perform out there, but at the same time, without feeding off of the people's the people cheering and all that stuff, does that make that harder, or is it easier for you to perform with no crowd as you have probably been in the last year?
I have this joke with promoters, which when this all started to happen, where they were telling me how did I feel about doing shows with no crowd. Uh, I told them, for over 2 decades, I had been doing the undercards for Michael Buffer and for Jimmy Lennon. And if you've ever been to shows and in Vegas at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there is no crowd.
Right.
The arena is completely empty. So I've had a lot of practice doing that. So I've done it before in the past. I think it probably becomes more evident when you have a great fight like you had with Cepeda and Baranchek not too long ago, where I mean the guys were just there was like 8 knockdowns in 5 rounds.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking, man, God, how would that have been with a crowd? The
Right.
crowd would have been going absolutely nuts. For me personally, it's not that big of a difference. Like I said, I've been in that environment quite a bit, especially like I said, working the undercards. Um, the hardest part to adapt has been dealing with all the COVID restrictions, especially places like, well, almost everywhere you go, California. I've done some shows in Mexico where the restrictions have not been obviously quite as demanding as they have been in California. But just being, for example, with the Ring City shows that we were doing at Wild Card, you get there on a Tuesday. As soon as you get there, you're sent to your room. They give you a bag of food, and the next morning you go get tested. You go directly right back to your room, and you have to wait for your test results. And even once you do get the test results, you're not allowed to go into each other's rooms or hang out in the lobby or go down the street and get some food. So it really becomes very restrictive in the sense that you're there for 4 days, and the entire 4 days you're stuck in your room.
Wow.
Once you go to the show, there's literally a walkway that would go from the hotel out the back alley, and you could only interact with people who had already been cleared and tested. And you walked into the restricted area there at Wild Card, and you did the show. And once the show was over, then the quarantine was broken. But up until that point, there was zero freedom as far as going out, getting food. All the food would get delivered right to your door. So I'm not the most social of people, but when they don't allow you to do it, it becomes a little bit more restrictive. Just the fact that you can't do it, it makes it a little harder. So that for me has been the more difficult part too. And also the trips have been extended in the sense that you have to get there a few days earlier than you typically would. So that can be a little bit more challenging.
And as you were speaking right now, I kind of remember the last time we talked, which was, wow, almost 8 years ago. I remember you said one of your pet peeves was the corners of the fighters, yelling instructions that you're yelling at you, how they wanted you to announce their guy. And now with no crowd or anything, do you hear these people, yelling instructions at you a little louder because of it?
Um, there's always one member of the boxing group that's louder than everybody else.
Right.
Uh, Usually it's one of the seconds in the group, or usually it's the fighter, and then there's like maybe three or four guys that are with him or whatever. And there's always one guy that's very, very gregarious, very a little bit over the top. Um, and typically the only time it really bothered me was when they're doing it as I'm trying to announce, and they're trying to throw in information, that to me, once I start announcing it, man, the train is going. Whatever I was going to say is going to be said. Anything that you're throwing at me right now, I'm not even paying attention to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a pet peeve. But no, it really they don't tend to do it anymore any less than they did before. I know now you do have people trying to get a little bit more creative, or I've had corners who will do a full performance and tell me this is how they want me to do it, and then they want me to emulate what they're doing. Literally, like they want me to audition how am I going to do it in the ring? So
Right.
it can be a little bit odd, and I try just to shake it off or whatever. I don't make a big deal out of it, but yeah, you do meet a lot of over the top personalities in boxing.
From sitting there ringside throughout, the whole entire card, every card that you work at, I'm sure you've noticed fighters, how they perform pre-COVID and now with COVID. Especially the first guy that comes to mind is Jose Ramirez. I know you've announced him over in Fresno, where he packs a crowd of over 15,000 people, and now he'll have to fight, in front of no crowd. Do you see the difference in performances from the fighters because of this?
I think it just varies from fighter to fighter. As you said, there are certain guys that really do feed off of the crowd. Jose probably is one of those because, I mean, in Fresno, he's such a huge star.
Right.
As you mentioned, there are shows where he's done 13,000, 15,000 people. Some of those have been like on a Sunday afternoon. So I'm assuming he is one of those guys that really feeds off of the energy from the audience. I think probably a bigger factor is just I think everyone's training has been affected. I think it has to hang over your head. It's even hung over my head where, am I going to make this trip out to Hollywood, and then when I get tested, I'm going to come up positive, and off or not, I'm going to just have to return back home, and who knows what's going to happen. So I'm thinking probably that's a bigger factor than the crowd itself for a lot of these fighters, where there's so much uncertainty involved. Sometimes you get there and even though you're okay, maybe one of your trainers doesn't pass the test. And I think just a lot of the different elements that go with COVID and the added stress probably adds to either, some of the lackluster performances we've seen, and maybe some of the really good performances possibly as well.
The last time we talked, also, I remember there was that big rift between HBO and Showtime, and they weren't doing business. And there was that big thing, and now HBO is out of the boxing game. Showtime is having less relevant fights because hey, Mayweather's not around no more. And now the app game is going on, with the ESPN Plus and DAZN, and What do you think of this whole new technology thing in boxing? Is it bigger? Is it better? Is it the same? What do you think about it?
I think with one of the things that I've noticed throughout the years with boxing is especially the boxing crowd really doesn't like change that much. They're very slow to adapt to new technology. Um, I would ask some people. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it from people as well, where they're like, "Hey, do you have the zone?" They're like, I don't know how to get the zone." They
Right.
like like the technology scares them.
That's true.
And it's like, dude, you just go to your computer or you go to your laptop or your Apple, iPhone, and you download it. They're like, that's too much trouble or whatever it might be. So they're a lot of people have this tendency to just not adapt or they don't like change. And I think that's been something that's been very prevalent in the entire boxing culture. They're very slow to accept new technology or change in general. Um, but I think at some point it just gets forced upon you.
Right.
Um, with a lot of these, like I said, a lot of these fights, if you want to see them, you got to go to ESPN Plus. You have to go to the Zone. It's not; they're not available any longer through the traditional means of pay per view or terrestrial television. So I think at some point people they're just going to be forced to do so. Uh, I do think there is that somewhat large minority that will never change and never adapt to it. But I think at some point you'll have to because it's like my dad, where he's his flip phone's about to die, and I'm telling him, hey, I'm not sure where I can find another one. You're gonna have to adapt to a smartphone whether you like it or not. I think eventually that technology will be forced upon the public, and if you want to watch boxing, you're gonna have to adapt to it.
But many people that work for Top Rank, either currently or in the past, they've had like a real deep loyalty to the company. Why do you think this is, and what has it been like for you working for a company like Top Rank?
Well, I think the fact that essentially I did two shows for a small promoter, and from there I jumped right into Top Rank. I always felt it was a great privilege to work for them, work for a company with such a long history, such a long tradition of really building champions. I mean, when you look at their roster, everyone from Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, De La Hoya, Mayweather, Pacquiao. I mean, the greats of the greats have gone and fought under the Top Rank banner. And it's always been a company that treats everyone with respect. That's probably the best way I can put things. They've always been very respectful. They've always been the first to not only give you the opportunity but reward you for that opportunity, both financially and in other ways. Uh, and I think that's really where loyalty stems from. Where there's some things that maybe I shouldn't talk about, but Top Rank has taken care of some people that have fought with them in the past that other promoters haven't done. They'll take care of them financially even after they've long stopped, fighting for them. And when you see those types of things, it's one of those deals where you can't help but respect the company, respect the people that work there, and I think that's why even those that are current employees or former employees, they always have a very positive and very high opinion of the company having worked for them.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the reasons why I asked that question was a guest I had right about summertime, right after the summer, was Richie Sandoval, and he was a fighter from the past, and he got hurt during the game, and now he's working for Top Rank, and he's very happy there. Back to what we are talking about, these apps and whatnot. One positive thing about these apps is that and Top Rank as well on ESPN Plus, they're showing whole cards now. I mean, they pretty much have the card now from bottom to top instead of just showing co-main events and main events. Now you guys are showing all these fights. We start seeing all these kids like Gabriel Flores from Stockton and Teofimo, who's now we know what he's got. But we've been seeing all these guys develop and grow. What do you think about that? Seeing these fights being televised that, like you said earlier, they weren't televised before because they were, the preliminaries that were going on at noon. What do you think about that now that those are being televised?
I think that's one of the things that Top Rank doesn't get credit for. If you look back, they were the first ones to do that. They were the first ones to televise the preliminary cards on YouTube, on TopRank.com.
Mm-hmm.
That was going on years ago,
Right.
and they really were the first to kind of adapt to that new technology. And I think it's great because the hardcore fans, the ones that do arrive early to some of these shows, you get to see those stars of the future, like you said, like a Teofimo Lopez, like a Gabe Flores. I mean, if you go back even 10 or even 5, 6 years, you got to see the Oscar Valdez's on the undercards. You got to see some of these other names that are now, I remember I was looking at some old video, and it was one of the undercard fights that we had done in Denver, Colorado. And the first fight out was a young kid that no one had ever heard of by the name of Terrence Crawford, and he was the first fight out. There was maybe a handful of people in the audience, uh, and it's Terrence Crawford, and he got a fantastic knockout. And on the main guy on the fight was Mike Alvarado, because we were fighting in Denver, and or we had the show in Denver, and like I said, if you get there early, you never know who are some of these guys that you're going to see. Some incredible talents that sooner or later are the guys up on the marquee, and they're the guys that are fighting, at AT&T Stadium, or they're fighting, at the T-Mobile Arena, and it gives you a chance to really connect with these fighters when you've seen them develop as from a 4-rounder to a 6-rounder, and then eventually you see them going for a regional title, and then a few years down the road they're fighting for world titles and their household names. It really gives you an attachment, and it really gives you an appreciation for the way that these guys have developed.
Doing what you do, you see people start their careers, you see people grow, you see people retire, even though you've seen them, start their career. Like a Miguel Cotto, I think he started about that time. Is it kind of strange for you to see these guys start and then see them all the way down to retirement? Do you kind of trip out on that when you think about it?
It is. It's really, boxing is kind of an arc with the way fighters are. They start off as the can't miss prospect coming out of the Olympics, and they're slowly getting higher and higher and higher, and then they reach that climax where they are the guy. Miguel Cotto fighting Pacquiao or fighting Mayweather, and then slowly you see them on the other side of that arc when then they are the name that the other guy is trying to make a name for themselves off of, and then eventually you see them as their career is winding down, and it really is mind blowing when you see that you've been able to go through or witness the entire career of guys. I mean, I've done the same thing with guys like Rocky Juarez, Juan Diaz. I was flipping through some old pictures, and there's a picture of an early, Juan Manuel Marquez fight that I had done when he was already an established fighter, but he wasn't, the Marquez that everybody knows now,
Right.
and just to see him go through that arc, even guys like Orlando Salido, Orlando Salido was an opponent for a very long time, and he was a guy with not a very impressive record, but if you were in the boxing world, he was as tough as they come, and he was a guy who, even though he would put on some great performances, if it was a close decision, he never really got the decision because he wasn't the big name. And to see a guy like that, when he beat Juanma Lopez, and he had some of these other fights with some of these great champions, to see them get the recognition when they go from obscurity to a certain level of popularity, it is very interesting to see that entire arc of a professional career. And sometimes it can be sad as well, where you see fighters whom where these can't miss prospects, and it just didn't work out for them. And then in their latter years, you see them taking fights that perhaps they shouldn't be taking, or they're just a shell of what they once were.
Yeah, and on that note, actually, I found myself in the last year going through some tape fights that I had from like 15 years ago, and a lot of those were solo boxeo cards from the show you first started in. Do you miss those days in doing your thing in solo boxeo, or are you kind of glad that's over with?
No, I mean it's something you definitely miss it. And you look at it, I think like anything else, when you get nostalgic about stuff, you look at it through a filter where
Mm-hmm.
you may only remember the good parts, and you don't remember solo boxeo was 50 shows a year for 8 years, which when you look at it, man, that's a lot of flying, a lot of being away from home, a lot of our shows were like on Fridays and Saturdays. That's a lot of quinceañeras, a lot of weddings, and a lot of parties that you missed with the family. You would be you would be the only one that wasn't in the big portrait. But it definitely was a great time. As you said, so many names went through that series. Margarito, Cotto, Calderon, Abner Mares,
Mhm.
uh, Travieso Arce. Jorge Paez towards the end of his career. Chavez Jr. made quite a name for himself there as well.
Right.
So yeah, what I really enjoyed was the fact that Solo Boxeo was a series that kind of brought the fights to the barrio sometimes. Where I don't know if you ever had the chance to go to some of the shows we did, like at the Maywood Activity Center, or we did some shows in Oxnard as well. At there's a Coliseum over by the ocean somewhere where we would do a series there as well, and literally people could just walk across the street and come and see a nationally televised show, and you'd have there were smaller audiences of about maybe 4 or 5 thousand people, but man, they were ram packed, and they were as loud and as enthusiastic as could be.
And actually, I just thought, I think my last guest was Jose Aguiniga, and I think you might have announced that one there in Oxnard, and it was up the street from my house, literally, when I did live in Oxnard a couple years back. Um, and, those were great shows, man. Those were fun. I think, like I said, Aguiniga was there, Pochito,
Yeah,
Rolando
Rolando
Reyes.
Reyes. Yeah,
Yeah, he,
yeah.
he was there as well. And actually, Brandon Rios and Ortiz, they also they fought out of there too. Um, you know,
I believe Victor Ortiz had his first loss on
Pro,
one of those shows where
that's
the
right.
guy refused to get up.
You're right. That's absolutely right. And we talked about all those,
Yeah.
and those were like great times in Oxnard. Like going through, or when you think about all these fights that you've done in little venues and stuff like that, and then you see how you yourself have grown and how you've you've moved on to like where you're pretty much doing these big cards. Do you kind of trip out on that as well? How you've grown yourself as a ring announcer?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll stumble across some of my earlier footage, and man, you just kind of cringe at how bad you really were when you were first starting out. Where when I look at some of the early stuff that I did, I was so concerned with not messing up that I didn't put any style to it. It was more of I could tell what was going through my mind when I look at the videos, where it was, hurry up and don't mess up and get off of this microphone as quickly as you can. And then you see an evolution, where you become more comfortable with yourself. You develop your own way of presenting things, and you see how you start to revel in the moment. Where you may be on camera for only 30, 40 seconds, but for those 30, 40 seconds, you're the only thing that's on, whether it be HBO or NBC Sports or ESPN or whatever it might be. So yeah, it does become mind blowing at a certain point, because you realize what all that this has provided for me. It was something that I did on a whim, and it's really given me an incredible life. I've had the chance to go around the world. I've seen some of the ancient marvels of the world, all due to boxing. The home that I'm currently sitting in is due to boxing. Some of the things that I'm doing outside of the sport are all derived from that, and all derived from that one little chance that I took on entering a contest, and I thought it would be a case of they were going to give me a videotape and a T-shirt and say, "Hey man, I hope you enjoyed it. You know, go back to where you came from," and it turned into so much more. Um, and like I said, the ability to have worked with some of the greatest promoters and some of the greatest fighters as well. It does become mind blowing when you sit back and look at it. Um, and yeah, you have to appreciate what the sport has done for what it's done for both my professional and personal life.
Like I said, I was reviewing all these tapes in the last year, and I have a lot more that I reviewed in the past several years of solo boxeo, and I can't think of a replacement for you. I can't think of a time you weren't there. Is it a rarity that when you call in sick, or is it rare that you miss a day or you miss a shot?
Well, I never called in sick. I just, people would always ask me that. They're like, "Hey, what happens when you get sick?" And you say, "Well, you don't get sick. I get sick. I get sick Sunday through Thursday. And Friday I better be well." There was one solo boxeo that I did miss, but it was not because of me being sick. It was I clearly remember we were doing at the time was we were still doing HBO Latino. HBO Latino would air on Thursdays, and then Friday was solo boxeo. And I was going from an HBO Latino show that Golden Boy was doing somewhere in Southern California, and I had to fly from Southern California to Puerto Rico overnight, basically. And in Dallas, where I was making a layover, we got caught with a horrendous thunderstorm. Dallas is famous for tornadoes and lots of storms that roll in. And essentially, I was never able to get out of Dallas. And they, fortunately, in Puerto Rico, the local promoter there had another guy that he would use on non-televised shows, and they called him up and he did the event. But yeah, it was not. You just didn't get sick. It was a case of the show must go on, regardless of what was happening. Come Friday, you better be ready to go. You better be ready to go, and you know, do all the home remedies and everything else that you need to by Thursday night. So when 8 o'clock on Friday nights rolled around, you were 100%. And fortunately, for the most part, that's the way it worked out.
Wow, a Latino that doesn't call in sick. Wow, that's
I know,
I'm gonna
right?
write that
Yeah.
down. I think the last few times I've had you on, I've always asked you this question, and I'm gonna probably ask it every time I get you on. Is there a Mrs. Lupe Contreras on the horizon?
On the horizon, I don't think so. I think I think I've given you the same answer that each time you've asked me. I'm the only one in the family that's never been married, never had kids. Uh, I do have a dog, but for the most part, yeah, I don't see a Mrs. Contreras in at least not, formally on paper or like they say in the legal sense. But yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know if that lifestyle, well, like the kids say, I don't know if I'm about that life. So, I think it's very difficult when you have to be with someone that's very secure,
Right.
someone who doesn't have aspirations to do entertainment as well. You have to be with someone who, I hate to use this term, a normal person, where they have
Right.
maybe a 9 to 5, or their life is completely away from the entertainment field. Um, because it's a business that can be very, very strange. It's very competitive. Also, oftentimes people will come up to you and they're very familiar with you, and even though you don't know who they are, they'll hug you. They act like you guys are really, really good friends, even though your interaction in the past has been very casual. So when someone sees that, they're like, "Well, who was that person?" You're like, oh, "Man, I'm really not quite sure. You know, I think their name is so and so, and
Yeah.
it looks like you're lying, and you're not. It's like I really don't know who that was." Um, so yeah, so if you're not with somebody who's very secure and very together themselves, it can put you in some really awkward moments and
Yeah.
awkward situations.
Pingo needs a mom, but hey.
Yeah, yeah. No, Pingo has two grandparents that spoil the heck out of him, and when I travel, that's who he stays with, and yeah, he's as long as you give him his walks and his snacks, he's good.
He's good. What are the pros and cons of doing all this traveling? How does that affect you?
Well, let's start with the pros. I think the pros are you get to see a lot of places that you normally wouldn't get a chance to see. You get to enjoy. I mean, I'm one of these people that I didn't get on an airplane till I was in my late 20s. I came from a background where travel really wasn't part of growing up. If you went somewhere, you went to Mexico to visit the relatives, or you might travel to a gas tank's worth of distance to go down to the beach or something like that. But it wasn't, we weren't taking trips to Disneyland, and we weren't taking trips to the Grand Canyon or a family vacation. Economically, it just wasn't possible. Um, so as an adult, having that ability to see places, pretty much every corner of the world. I've had the chance to go to Europe, South America on numerous occasions. As I mentioned before, gotten to see some really interesting things. One of my favorite things is when I'm watching television shows and something comes up on TV, and it's like, man, I've been there, you know.
Mhm.
Uh, and like I said, as a kid, it was something that was so unfathomable. When you thought of people traveling, it was for the other. It wasn't for you. You know, you would see a commercial on TV about, you know, a travel package to Disney World, and you couldn't even fathom that. You're like, that's not for me. So to be able to do that and travel and get to see so many places and I've gotten the chance to meet a lot of great people that without travel I otherwise would not have been able to. You know, most places I go to, there is someone that I have an amicable relationship with, and I can call up and say, hey, you want to hang out, have lunch here, have lunch there, or if they're in Houston, they, stop by and say hi to me as well. Um, or I've had friends from my youth who have moved away, and due to the fact that I do travel, I get the chance to see them because, they'll either be nearby or I'm in the city where they've moved to. So those are the positives. The negative, as I've said, it can be where the travel does dictate certain aspects of your life. As I mentioned before, weddings and family events tend to take place on the weekend, which also coincide with when the fights take place. So oftentimes you either might be there already, or you might be on your way back and you're missing whatever is going on. And as I mentioned before, there's no such thing as sick days or oh, I've got a wedding that weekend. I'm sorry, I can't do Pacquiao Bradley or whatever it might be. You just don't say no to those types of things.
Right.
And also the burden of it's not so bad when in from 2013 to 2017 we went to what I thought was going to be one trip to China. We did like 17 trips to China, and those, and the trip to China is no joke, man. It's 20 something hours each way, and once you do get there, your clock is all off, and you never quite adjust, and then when you come back, your clock is all messed up from going there as well.
Mhm.
Um, so like I said, if you're preparing for a 17-hour flight, that's fine. But when the 17-hour flight, some complications come up and it turns into a 34-hour flight or 34-hour trip, that's when it can really be mentally exhausting. Last year, I did a trip to Peru for an MMA series, and my trip back got canceled 4 times. One of the times we were actually on the plane ready to come back, and then they had us all get off the plane, and the flight was canceled for a couple of days. So you end up staying in the country 3 more days than you had planned, with nowhere to go, nothing to do, and you're just itching to get home. So some of those things can be a negative. As far as your life is concerned, typically what up until COVID hit, the way my life was, from Thursday through Sunday, I was either traveling to or from an event, and then your everyday life, the grocery shopping, the cutting the grass, the doing this, that, and the other took place from Monday through Wednesday. And that's really the way my life typically was scheduled, to where all my personal stuff took place, from those 3 days, and when Thursday came, you dropped everything and you got on a plane, and it was all about boxing and business. And so yeah, it becomes very regimented. The cycle tends to go into effect to where when you're on the road, you want to go home, and when you're home, you want to go on the road. So it's this really weird sensation where you're never quite happy either place. And so that's where typically it tends to affect you. But since COVID hit, this was the first time where it was almost 6 months where I hadn't gone anywhere. And like I said, even with the Solo Book Sales series and with some of the other shows that we've been doing, it's been constant travel and constant back and forth for the past 20 years. And for that to just come to a complete and sudden stop, it really does affect, your life and your schedule.
What are some of your favorite places to go to, or that you look forward to go to, and what places or do you really not care to go whenever required?
Um, sometimes some of the smaller towns can be a bit tough. They're hard to get to travel wise. If you're not traveling, to Los Angeles or Vegas or some other places, sometimes it involves 2 or 3 airplanes depending on where you're going to, or it involves an airplane and then you got to drive and a couple of hours. When they're some of these smaller casinos that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, they can be difficult to get to. And then once you get to, there's really not much going on. So those can be a bit of a chore. Also, some cities, this is probably going to rub people a lot of people the wrong way. I don't care a great deal for like New York City or places like that. It's a lot of hustle and bustle, a lot of noise, constant noise, uh, and it's a nice place to visit. But when you're there for a week or so, and there's a place where we typically stay, which is really close to Madison Square Garden, and depending on what side of the hotel you're on, the way the buildings are situated, you can hear people talking on the street, and you're 7 stories up. Somehow the way things echo, and something about the way people handle themselves in New York is everything is yelling. There's no, people sound like they're fighting and they're just having a nice little conversation, but they're yelling at the top of their voice. And this is happening at 6 in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. And there's also like there's a fire station just down the street. So the fire station goes off, and the fire department goes off 24 hours a day. So you're about to fall asleep, and you're hearing sirens and you're hearing noise. So that some of those places like that can be a bit of a chore to to try and sleep and try to have your a nice bit of a rest. But for the most part, there isn't anywhere horrible. Um, I do make it a point to where I try to see if there's any special attraction going on in that city, or maybe something that doesn't stop here that I really wanted to see or do that stops in other cities. You can take advantage of that. So that always is a plus as well.
And I didn't even know that you did MMA shows. Doing those type of shows and also doing boxing shows for all these years. What's the difference in the crowd? Is it something that you recognize really quick? Is the difference of how the crowd acts between an MMA show and a boxing show?
Yeah, there is a great difference. They tend to skew a lot younger on the MMA side. Um, Also, one of the things that benefits the MMA crowd is a lot of these fighters don't necessarily train. They train at gyms, but they're gyms that are almost like MMA schools. So, say you have a fighter that's fighting out of one particular gym. Everybody that goes to that gym comes out and supports the guy. Boxing gyms are very different. Boxing gyms are more solitary. Uh, there isn't that I guess communal feeling with some of the boxing gyms. So you don't see. Usually, his friends and family will come, but not the people he trains with or the people that work out at the same gym. It's not. It's usually not like that. So that's one of the main differences I see. Um, they also tend to be the environment's a little bit different. It's more of a party atmosphere, um, and they tend to come more for specific fights. And it doesn't matter where the fight might land. If their friend is fighting early, they come early. Um, with most boxing shows, it's like as we mentioned before, the arena will be pretty empty up until the main event. I mean, I'm sure you've been to the Vegas fights where up until a few moments before the main, the arena will be empty. Everybody will still be chilling in the casino, or they might even be hanging out of the pool. And they've spent this ridiculous amount to go see a fight, and they only come to see one fight, as opposed to seeing the entire card. Um, but yeah, so there tends to be more of a communal type situation with the fighters and the people that come see the events, and yeah, it tends to be a younger crowd. And there's very little crossover. People always position, hey, boxing against MMA, and for the most part, there's really not a great deal of crossover. Um, and I notice it myself where I'll do an MMA event, and people will say, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. How long have you been doing this?" So they've never seen you, on HBO. They've never seen you on ESPN or Solo Excel. They just don't follow the sport. So it's almost refreshing because it's like you're starting from scratch as far as getting the crowd's attention and getting the crowd's I guess not necessarily, I guess for lack of a better term, respect, or for them to acknowledge the fact that you've been doing this for a while. So yeah, so there's very little crossover as well.
And I've actually heard your boss there, Bob Arum, in a lot of interviews, refer to MMA as garbage, if not worse. What do you think of MMA as a that other combat sport? What do you think of MMA overall?
I've always enjoyed it. As I mentioned to you before, when I said the first two shows I did were MMA shows. Um, I got my start. I used to train at a Thai boxing gym, and at the time I was a radio DJ, and the gym owner said, "Hey, you want to be the ring announcer?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." And at the time it wasn't even called MMA. They called it NHB, no holds barred.
Mm.
And so that's where I got started, and I enjoy MMA. I follow it quite a bit, and I enjoy a lot of combat sports. You know, I'll watch MMA. I like watching Muay Thai. You know, some of the glory kickboxing that you see. Um, and as I mentioned before, you know, it's not everyone's cup of tea. And as I said, a lot of people in boxing are very traditional.
Hmm.
But you'd be amazed at MMA fighters have a tremendous amount of respect for boxers.
Absolutely.
Uh, because of the fact I think what it really comes down to is boxers don't need MMA, but MMA fighters need boxing. You know,
Yeah, you're right.
it's part of their toolkit. You know, boxers don't need jujitsu, they don't need Muay Thai, they don't need wrestling, so they could care less. They don't watch any of it. But MMA fighters will watch the footwork of Lomachenko. They'll watch, you know, people. I've heard MMA fighters say, "Yeah, man, I'm gonna try and land that, you know, that hook to the body like Canelo does." You know, and so they watch it, they study it because it's something that's important to their overall game. Um, and I just wish that boxers would give as much respect to the MMA athletes as the MMA athletes give boxers because it's definitely there.
Yeah, very true. I actually heard the other side, Dana White, praise boxing. So I know he has a lot of respect there for the sport. He says he's a big boxing fan. Um, I've seen pictures of you. I think pre our last interview, that you did some, like a kickboxing as far as like exercising and all that stuff. I've seen, you post things about sparring with your buddy Raul Marquez, former a world champion and Olympian from the '92 Olympics. Do you get into the sport just because of announcing it? Is that how you decided to train or exercise in that way?
No, as I mentioned to you, it was quite the opposite. Where I had already been involved in Muay Thai and I had competed on a very low level
Mm.
in Muay Thai, enough to know that I wasn't good at it, and I should find something else to do. Um, but it was always something that I enjoyed, and the thing about getting in the ring is being outside of it and actually getting in there. It's so close, but it's such a world away. Very few people have actually, I know people that have gone to a ton of fights and they've watched boxing forever, but have never once given it a shot. You know, um, and I think once you actually get in there and see, if you, my whole thing was even when I started the whole Muay Thai thing, I wanted to see, do I have what it takes to even do one round or even get through one fight? And then when you get through one fight, you're like, hey, maybe I can do another, and oh, maybe I can do one more. Um, and one of the things too was I always thought to myself, I wonder if I can go into with a professional. And then when you look at someone like Raul, he's such an accomplished guy. He always tells me exactly. Uh, if you've ever looked at his trophy case, it's like, wow, you see all these trophies and it's all first place, first place, first place. When you realize the levels that some of these athletes are at, where not only were you good, but you dominated. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Where you look at, and that's the way all these guys are at the top level. All these, if you look at Lomachenko's, trophy case, it's all first place from the time they were 12 to the time they were 20.
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing with Terrence Crawford. There's no
Mhm.
such thing as there's no second place medals. It's just all first place, first place. That's when you figure out the abilities that they have. Because even if you were a superstar amateur and then you become a respected professional, there's still guys even above that. So back to sparring with guys like Raul. I never win. You know, I never win any of the sparring matches. What helps me with him is the fact that I'm naturally a bigger guy. Uh, and also he was champion at 154.
Mhm.
He's probably more like 204 right now. Uh, So it's obviously he's not in his prime, but he still puts it on me. He tries. He definitely tries to let you know that he was an elite athlete and that you'll never be at that level. And when you're in there, that's exactly what you find out. I mean, as hard as I try sometimes, um, I'll literally train for our sparring, and he's done absolutely nothing for 3 weeks, and I've been running, I've been running 5 milers for 4 or 5 times a week in preparation. He still puts it on me,
Yeah,
and it's really frustrating because of the fact that you realize what natural athletes these guys are. I mean, it's not just it's a combination of things.
right.
It's not just, they have to have the discipline. They have to have the natural abilities. And then they also have to have the training to become what they've become. And that's why it's such a rare occurrence. You need all those qualities to make them great. And as I said, no matter how hard I try and how hard I train, and he can go out, drinking all weekend, and he still wins all the rounds. So it's frustrating, but fun.
I've always praised Olympians, and I've always these guys. I mean, it's not like they won one tournament and they made it on the Olympic scene. I mean, they won years and years and years of tournaments, and weekly and monthly and yearly. And they've won these big tournaments all around the world to make it there. From Muhammad Ali, 1960 Olympian, to Joe Frazier, another Olympian gold medalist. Foreman was too. Sugar Ray Leonard, Oscar De La Hoya, and Mayweather, and so on and so forth. All these guys were Olympians, and people think that it's easy to just make it big and become the biggest fighters of all time. No, these guys they paid their dues, and Raul
It's a
being
sacrifice. It literally becomes a lifestyle. And
right,
when you think about it, they've sacrificed their youth
right,
for all of this. It's when even if you're a 13-year-old, these guys still have to make weight. You know,
absolutely, yeah.
they're still making weight. They're still dropping, the pounds. They're still, as I mentioned before, it's a huge sacrifice when the other kids are going to the movies or hanging out at the club. These guys are cutting weight because they have to be, somewhere in Colorado Springs preparing for the next tournament that's coming up.
That's true.
And yeah, it's a tremendous sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, I had Robert Garcia from Oxnard over the summer. I had him on, and he was saying, hey, I didn't go to prom. I didn't because the next day I had to go run. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's sacrificing. When we first talked, and or we discussed how you got onto this game through that contest in solo book sale. Like you said, you thought you were just going to get a T-shirt, and they were going to send you on your way home. Do you have any regrets entering that contest now, looking back at your career doing this, or are you glad you did exactly what you did, which was come into this game?
Oh, I feel incredibly fortunate to have stumbled into boxing the way I did. It's given me, tremendous opportunities. I've had the chance to do commercials. I've had the chance to do, a minor role in the movie, and all sorts of things that I couldn't have. I mean, I dreamt about, but I really, didn't think would easily come to fruition. Um, and no, I have no regrets whatsoever. Um, as far as entering the business, I think there are some things I could have done differently. Um, I'm not the greatest of self promoters. I'm not the greatest of networkers as well. But it just isn't in me. I'm not one of these guys that I don't actively chase after certain positions or chase after certain jobs. Um, and in this type of business, as I said, it's very competitive. Uh, it can hurt you a bit. So if there's anything that I would do differently, it would probably be that where I would maybe earlier on, you know, be more open to being a bit of a self promoter. And a lot of it comes from it's just my personality. I'm a very easygoing. I'm not an aggressive person. Um, so I think that is something that I might have changed. But I'm very happy where I'm at. As you mentioned, I've been able to stick around for well over 2 decades now, and it's given me a lot of things that allow me to live very comfortably. As I mentioned, with this whole thing that we're going through now, the whole pandemic, even though, our industry shut down for quite some time, it gives you the ability to where you can still live comfortably and not worry about, where you're going to live, how you're going to pay your bills, and do some other things. So no, there's absolutely nothing. Even on my worst day in boxing, I never had any regrets about entering it at all.
2021 just started. What are you hoping for in this year for yourself and for your career?
Well, I've started to work with a lot of different companies as well. We just started a new series with Ring City USA, which I'm very excited about. It's airing on NBC Sports, um, and it's a really gritty type of format. I'm not sure if you've had the chance to see it or not, but we were doing the series at Wildcard Gym outside. They created a really great scene out there with a big giant video wall. The fighters would be coming out of Freddie's gym, and it allows a really interesting way of fighters from all different walks of life, different promoters that perhaps maybe wouldn't get a shot at getting some exposure on television. It gives them an opportunity to fight another guy who is on the same level as they are. It's not an undefeated kid fighting a journeyman. It's two guys who, have some really good records and they're going head to head. And it gives them the opportunity to find out early, do I have what it takes to go on to that next level? Yeah, I've been great on the regional scene, or I've had a great amateur career. But as I mentioned before, when you get to a certain level in boxing, it's I was Golden Glove champion. So what? So was I. Hey, I was national champion. Yeah, so what? So was I. Everybody comes with a full trophy case.
Right.
So this is a great series to show some of these young talents that perhaps we wouldn't otherwise get the chance to see because they're not associated with some of the bigger promoters or have contracts with some of the bigger networks. But yeah, it's a very exciting series that I'm a part of. I really am looking forward to things, hopefully getting back to normal. I really do miss the big arenas and, whether it be Madison Square Garden or the T-Mobile or Mandalay Bays, MGMs of Las Vegas. There's nothing quite like a big major fight in Las Vegas, man, where you're walking through the casino and everybody's super excited. Everybody's, got their shirts on, they've got their headbands and there's that little parade. It never gets old where you go from the MGM and you got to walk through all those shops and restaurants to get to
Right.
the MGM Grand Garden Arena,
Yeah, I miss
where where you see people, they're on the either waiting to see who comes out of the crowd they can take a picture with, or they're waiting to try and buy some last minute tickets because they just showed up in Vegas hoping that they could get a cheap ticket or just one ticket. And there's such a great vibe that when you go through that little walkway, and then afterwards when the fight is over and you're coming through, and everybody's either talking about what a great fight it was, or no, this guy got robbed, or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
and everybody's there for that one reason. Everybody's there for that fight,
Yeah.
and everybody knows what's going on. And I think that's what I look most forward to is having those come back, and having the massive crowds and just getting the chance to see the hardcore boxing fans out there with their shirts and with their questions, asking you, hey, who's going to win here? Who's going to win there? When is Lopez going to fight Garcia? When is Garcia going to fight Derek Haney
Right.
or Devin Haney, I should say. So yeah, those are the things I'm most looking forward to in 2021.
Absolutely. I can't wait to check out the show from the Wildcard Gym. And, I haven't got a chance to tell you, but thank you very much for making that sound bit for the opening of my website, and that little welcoming that you did for me. And I appreciate it very much. Can't wait to see you on TV again and can't wait to get you back on. And I hopefully it's not another 7.5 years like it has been since the last time you've come on. But I appreciate you, Lupe, for everything you do. And thank you for what you did for me there. And, I appreciate you, man. And, thank you for coming on TheBoxingBar.com and can't wait to talk to you again down the line.
Hey, no problem, man. And I appreciate the support.